When my dad said, "You'll inherit nothing if you don't obey," I smiled. 6 months later, his business collapsed, and the only thing left to inherit was his unpaid debts. I was 19 when my dad, Robert, 54, male, sat across from me at our dining table and delivered his favorite line of control: "You'll inherit nothing if you don't obey." He didn't even raise his voice. He just let the words hang, smug and sharp, like a knife he enjoyed watching me bleed on. My stomach twisted, but I forced a smile. Not the polite kind. The kind that says, "I'm not playing your game anymore." Robert ran our family like he ran his business, with intimidation, ultimatums, and the unshakable belief that everyone was replaceable. He loved to remind me that money was the only language people respected. He wasn't wrong, but what he never understood was that fear only works until someone stops caring about your approval. That night, something inside me cracked. I realized that if the price of his inheritance was blind obedience, I'd rather starve than beg. I didn't argue. I just nodded, pushed my plate away, and walked upstairs. In the hallway, I passed the framed photo of him and my mom on their wedding day. The glass was cracked. He'd thrown it years ago during one of his tantrums and never bothered to fix it. I touched the jagged edge and thought, this house is already broken. He just hasn't noticed yet. The weeks after that dinner were a blur of silent wars. He'd slam doors when I came home late. He'd accidentally leave overdue bills on the counter as if to remind me of the empire I was walking away from. He even went so far as to cancel the gas card I used for commuting to class. Every move was designed to pull me back under his thumb. But I kept smiling, the kind of smile that drove him insane, because he couldn't decide if it meant defiance or pity. Then came the escalation. One night, I found my car with its tires slashed in our driveway. He stood on the porch smoking a cigar like some cartoon villain, eyes glittering with challenge. He didn't say it outright, but I knew it was his way of declaring war. "You can't win without me." I stared back at him, the reek of burning tobacco filling the air, and for the first time in my life, I didn't flinch. I was done being his puppet. I was done begging for scraps from his empire. If he wanted obedience in exchange for his kingdom, fine. I'd let him keep it. Let him choke on it. Because what he didn't know, what I hadn't even admitted to myself until that night, was that his empire was already crumbling. And I was going to be there, front row, when it fell apart. The first cracks in Robert's so-called empire didn't appear in the headlines or the quarterly numbers. They appeared in his face. He was always meticulous about his appearance. Sharp suits, slicked back hair, teeth too white to be real. But suddenly, he looked tired. I noticed the sweat on his temples after board calls, the way his tie hung loose when he thought no one was watching. His swagger had cracks, and if you've ever lived under a tyrant, you know. Once the mask slips, you never forget the real face underneath. One Friday night, I came home late from class and found the living room wrecked. A crystal decanter shattered across the hardwood, shards like tiny knives glittering under the lamp. The TV had a boot print right through the screen. And Robert? He was slumped in his leather chair, cigar ash burned into the armrest, muttering curses about traitors and rats in the company. His phone lay on the floor, cracked. I didn't ask what happened. I didn't need to. Someone had dared defy him, and this was the fallout. He noticed me in the doorway. His bloodshot eyes snapped to mine. "You think you're better than me, don't you?" he spat. His voice cracked, raw and wild. I just leaned against the wall, silent. That smile, the one he hated, curled on my lips again. That was enough. He shot up, grabbing the armrest for balance, nearly toppling the chair. He stormed toward me, his shoes crunching over glass, his breath sour with whiskey. For a second, I thought he'd swing. Instead, he shoved me against the doorframe so hard my shoulder ached for days. His spit hit my cheek as he whispered, "When I'm gone, all of this will be yours, or nothing, and you're choosing nothing." I wiped my face slowly, looked him dead in the eye, and said, "Maybe nothing's better than rotting in your shadow." He froze, just for a second. His jaw twitched, his grip loosened, and then, like a toddler mid-tantrum, he grabbed a photo off the wall and hurled it at the floor. It was his and Mom's wedding picture again, the one already cracked. The frame split completely this time, wood splintering across the tile. Symbolic, isn't it? His marriage in pieces, his family in ruins, his empire next. That night, lying in bed with the echo of shattered glass still in my ears, I realized something. Robert wasn't just losing control of me. He was losing control of everything. The boardroom sharks he mocked, the shady partners he flaunted, the employees he terrorized, they were circling now. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of his rage. I was savoring it, because the louder he screamed, the clearer it became. The collapse had already started, and I was finally free to watch it burn. Don't forget to subscribe. The first time Robert's mask slipped in public was at a company dinner, a gaudy event he threw every quarter to remind everyone he was still king. He rented out a steakhouse downtown, filled the place with top-shelf liquor and fake laughter, and strutted like a peacock in a midnight blue suit. Normally, these nights were about handshakes, promises, and Robert making sure everyone knew he was untouchable. But not this time. I wasn't supposed to be there. He hadn't invited me, obviously. But one of the junior managers, a guy named Colin who'd slipped me hints before about weird stuff happening in accounting, texted me, "You should come tonight. Bring popcorn." That was all I needed. I put on a clean shirt, walked in like I belonged, and slid into the back. Robert stood at the head of the long mahogany table, glass raised. His speech was the same boilerplate he'd given a dozen times before about growth, family, and legacy. Except tonight, his voice wobbled. His hand shook so badly that the whiskey sloshed over his cufflink. People glanced at each other, whispered. Then came the moment. A mid-level exec, braver than most, asked about rumors of unpaid invoices and suppliers threatening to pull contracts. The room went still. Robert's face turned red, then purple. He slammed his glass down so hard the stem snapped clean off, slicing his palm. Blood dotted the white tablecloth like some twisted signature. "You dare question me?" he roared, clutching his bleeding hand, spit flying. "Do you know who built this empire? Do you know what I've sacrificed?" The exec leaned back, pale. Everyone else froze, forks suspended midair, eyes darting like guilty kids caught whispering. And Robert? He doubled down. He staggered to his feet, knocking his chair over, and began pacing the room, ranting about loyalty and betrayal. He named names, called people leeches and parasites. At one point, he hurled a salt shaker at the wall, where it exploded into shards. Security finally stepped in. Imagine that. My father, who once terrified me with just a glance, now being gently but firmly escorted out of his own dinner by two rent-a-cops, while the board members stared at their plates. His hand dripped blood on the carpet as he screamed over his shoulder, "You'll all crawl back to me, every single one of you." I stayed in the shadows, heart pounding, watching the empire unravel in real time. The man who swore I'd inherit nothing had just shown his entire kingdom that he was already bankrupt, morally, mentally, and soon financially. On the walk home, I laughed for the first time in months. Not because it was funny, but because the sight of Robert bleeding and bellowing in front of his empire was the clearest proof yet. The collapse wasn't coming someday. It was already here. After the dinner disaster, Robert tried to patch his reputation the only way he knew how, by forcing his employees into loyalty. He sent out mass emails about team spirit, handed out pointless bonuses to a few favorites, and barked at anyone who dared mention the scene at the steakhouse. But no one forgot. His meltdown lived in whispers, in the way people avoided his office, in how investors suddenly rescheduled meetings they'd once begged to attend. I, on the other hand, was done standing in the wings. Watching him spiral was satisfying, sure, but it wasn't enough. I wanted him to feel powerless the way he'd made me feel my entire life. And that's where Colin came back into the picture. One night, Colin and I met in the parking lot of a strip mall, away from anyone who might recognize him. He was jittery, chain-smoking, eyes darting like he was about to commit a crime, which technically he was. He pulled a folder from his backpack and shoved it into my hands. Inside, late invoices, falsified reports, evidence of money funneled into shell accounts. Robert wasn't just reckless, he was dirty. "I shouldn't be giving you this," Colin muttered, voice low, "but he threatened my job last week in front of everyone. Said he'd ruin me if I ever crossed him. Screw that. If he goes down, I want to see it." I stared at the papers, my pulse hammering. This was it, the lever I'd been waiting for. Proof that Robert's empire wasn't just crumbling, it was rotten to the core. When I got home, Robert was in the kitchen, slamming cabinet doors, cursing about some supplier who'd cut him off. His rage filled the air like smoke. Normally, I'd keep quiet, slip past him. But not tonight. Tonight, I stopped in the doorway, folder tucked under my arm, and said, "You ever wonder what people will remember about you when you're gone?" He froze, turning slowly, eyes narrowing. "Careful," he warned, his voice a low growl. "You're walking a dangerous line." I smiled, the same smile that had haunted him since that night at the dining table. "No, Dad, you are." His fist slammed onto the counter, rattling a glass to the floor. He demanded to know what I meant, spit spraying, veins bulging at his temples. But I just walked upstairs, leaving him with the sound of the glass rolling in circles across the tile. That night, lying in bed, I opened the folder again. Each page was a nail for his coffin. All I had to do was choose how to hammer them in, quietly, through whispers to the right people, or loudly, in a way that would make his empire implode in front of the world. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like his son. I felt like his executioner. Don't forget to subscribe. Update 1. That week, everything turned acidic. Colin, 28, male, met me outside the campus library with the same jitter he'd had in the strip mall lot, but this time his eyes were darker. Fear braided with something like guilt. "He knows," he whispered, voice chopped. I told him nothing. But his people, he's been asking questions. They called my office. They were nice, then they weren't. I'm scared. He handed me his phone. There was a photo of my dorm window taken from across the quad. Night. The weak rectangle of my lamp. Someone's silhouette at the edge of the frame. I remember the way my hands went numb. I thought of the tires, the glass, the wedding photo splintered in the kitchen. Escalation like a ritual. He wasn't just a tyrant. He was a predator who'd learned to weaponize fear. And now he had names and numbers and the gall to use them. 2 nights later, I woke to heavy footsteps on the porch and the slam of the back gate. I peered through the curtains and saw Robert, 54, male, hunched and furious, pacing by our rusted mailbox like a caged animal. He had a flashlight and a man's foolish confidence. Too old to creep, too proud to ask. I opened the door before I thought, and he barreled in, the smell of whiskey and cigar smoke raw on his clothes. "You think you can stab me in the back?" he demanded, voice low and tearing. He grabbed the keys from the bowl, threw them across the table, and when I moved to pick them up, he shoved me so hard I hit the wall. The lamp toppled. The bulb exploded like a small white bomb. I tasted metal. He laughed, a sick, high sound, and then he did the thing that made my skin peel. He looked at me and said, "I'll make sure you can't work. I'll spit on your friends. I'll take everything." The next morning, my boss called. "We need to talk," she said, serious. Robert had left a voicemail, threatened reputational damage, hinted at lawsuits. I defended myself, showed the email from Colin, tried to explain that it was my father playing wrecking ball, but the seed had been planted. A client pulled their contract. My shift at the coffee shop got cut. He was not just destabilizing his own world, he was dragging mine into the sinkhole. He tried Colin next. I watched as Robert cornered him in a parking lot, voice ablade. Colin left with his shirt torn and a coffee spilled across his lap, hands trembling. But Colin didn't run. He came to me and put both hands on my shoulders. "If I go down, I wanted it to mean something," he said. "You ready?" That's when I stopped circling like a vulture and became a planner. Revenge is easiest when your enemy forgets how people operate, when they assume fear will always be enough. Robert had forgotten that people write, save, forward. He'd never imagined anger would be patient. I started small and neat. Anonymous emails to suppliers with scanned invoices from Colin. Quiet calls to 2 of his biggest investors, polite, concerned questions about cash flow and payroll dates. A folder appeared, anonymously, on a reporter's desk at a local paper. Copies of shell company transfers, names of offshore accounts, the kind of detail that makes auditors wake up sweating. I watched the ripples. Suppliers called, whispers hardened into letters, meetings were postponed. The board demanded transparency. Robert fumed and screamed and dragged me into the center of every scene, hoping to make me flinch. I didn't. He escalated in the ways he knew best. Public tantrums, smear attempts, threats handed to HR. He vandalized my bike and posted a picture of it on social media with a caption that masked menace as tough love. He sent a private investigator to follow me for a week. I learned the man's name, the license plate of his car, and passed both to a friend at the station. But here's the part that tastes sweetest. Every time Robert tried to break me by breaking my world, he exposed a ledger line, a lie, a trail. Every shove, every email, every threat he made left a fingerprint. He thought fear would make people quiet. Instead, it made evidence. One night late, I sat in the kitchen amid the shards of the lamp he'd thrown. My shoulder still ached. I pressed my hand to the glass and thought of the wedding photo. Then I opened my laptop and drafted an email to a regulatory board, polite, precise, and complete with attachments. I hit send, exhaled, and for the first time felt the delicious, dangerous warmth of being a step ahead. Robert wasn't stupid, unstable, yes, but not stupid. He felt the walls tightening before the cracks even showed in the headlines. That's the thing about tyrants. They can smell rebellion like smoke. And he knew it was me. He didn't have proof, but suspicion was enough for him to launch his counterattack. It started with stalking. I'd walk out of class and spot his black Mercedes parked across the street, engine idling, his silhouette barely hidden behind the tinted glass. Sometimes he wouldn't even bother hiding. He'd lower the window, smirk, and mouth, "You're nothing without me." I ignored him, but the knot in my stomach grew tighter each day. Then came the smear campaign. He called relatives, old family friends, anyone who'd listen, painting me as an ungrateful leech who was trying to destroy my own blood. At one point, my aunt texted me paragraphs about forgiveness and duty to family, like Robert had scripted her. I blocked her number. But Robert couldn't stop himself from escalating. One night, I came home to find my dorm room door pried open. My mattress had been slashed down the middle, stuffing spilling out like a gutted animal. On my desk lay a single sheet of paper, a photocopy of the inheritance clause from his will, with the words, "You get nothing," scrawled across it in red marker. My RA tried to file an incident report, but Robert had been smart enough not to leave fingerprints. The funny part? Instead of scaring me, it clarified everything. He was burning through his arsenal of intimidation, and each act only made him look more desperate. Colin and I sat together in a diner booth, stacks of paperwork between us, and I said, "He thinks he's breaking me, but all he's doing is giving us more ammo." Colin grinned for the first time in weeks. "So, we turn the screws?" That's when we made the decision. We'd stop leaking crumbs, we'd unleash the whole bakery. Colin knew which regulators were already sniffing around. I had connections with a reporter who'd been chasing corruption stories for years. Together, we built a package. Emails, invoices, bank statements, even voicemail transcriptions of Robert threatening suppliers. It was airtight. The night we sent it all off, Robert showed up at my dorm again. This time, he didn't bother with subtlety. He pounded on the door so hard that plaster cracked around the frame. When I didn't answer, he screamed loud enough for half the floor to hear, "You're throwing your life away. You'll inherit nothing. Nothing." His voice broke on the last word, and for the first time, it didn't sound like power. It sounded like fear. Inside, I sat in the dark, knees pulled to my chest, listening. My phone buzzed with a new email. "Received. Will follow up." My heart hammered, but not from panic, from anticipation. Robert had spent my whole life teaching me that control came from fear. But the truth was simpler. Control comes from timing. And my timing was perfect. It happened faster than I expected. One morning, I was sipping burnt coffee in the campus cafe when my phone lit up with a news alert. Local business titan under federal investigation. Robert's name was in the first line, followed by words like fraud, shell accounts, unpaid debts. My hands shook as I scrolled. They had everything. Photos of documents Colin had provided, quotes from anonymous employees, whispers about suppliers suing. My stomach flipped between nausea and exhilaration. This wasn't a whisper war anymore. This was front page. Robert reacted the only way he knew how, violently. He stormed into his own headquarters that afternoon like a hurricane in a $1,000 suit. I wasn't there, but Colin texted me a play-by-play. He's screaming, tore a phone out of the wall, threw a stapler through the glass divider. Minutes later, "Security's calling the cops. I think he's losing it." By evening, video surfaced online. Someone had filmed Robert in the lobby, red-faced and sweating, swinging at a security guard who tried to calm him down. His voice echoed through the atrium. "This is my empire! You parasites can't take it from me!" A chandelier trembled as he pounded his fist against the marble column. He looked less like a CEO and more like a cornered animal. That night, the regulators made their move. Agents raided his office, carrying out boxes of files and hard drives. Cameras flashed. His face, once plastered on billboards as the smiling patriarch of success, was now splashed across TV screens looking deranged and cornered. I went home and found him already there, pacing like a rabid dog. His tie was ripped, his knuckles bruised, and when he saw me, his eyes lit with pure venom. "This is you," he hissed, pointing a trembling finger. "You did this. My blood, my own son. You'll rot in hell before you see a cent from me." I held his gaze, heart pounding but steady. "There's nothing left to inherit, Dad. You made sure of that." For a second, I thought he might lunge. Instead, he grabbed the nearest thing, a chair, and hurled it across the room. It splintered against the wall, shards of wood raining down. Then, like a switch flipped, he collapsed into the corner, chest heaving, muttering about betrayal, about snakes eating snakes. I should have felt pity, but all I felt was relief. For once, the chaos wasn't mine to carry. He had built his empire on intimidation, and now he was choking on the rubble of it. I walked upstairs while he ranted to the shadows. On my desk sat the copy of his will he'd left after slashing my mattress. I picked it up, ran my thumb over the red scrawl. "You get nothing," and smiled, because he was finally right. There was nothing left, and it was glorious. Update 2. The weeks after the raid felt like living inside a storm cloud. Thunder in every headline, lightning in every whispered conversation. Robert didn't just fall, he imploded. Suppliers sued. Employees resigned in waves. Investors bailed so fast the building was half empty within a month. His name, once a symbol of power, became shorthand for corruption. And Robert, 54, male, couldn't stomach it. He went feral. He showed up at my campus one afternoon screaming my name across the quad like a drunk prophet. Students froze, phones lifted to record as he staggered toward me, face blotched purple with rage. He jabbed a finger into my chest and bellowed, "This is all your fault! You killed me! You murdered my legacy!" Campus security hauled him off, but not before he spat on the pavement at my feet, like he needed everyone watching to know I was cursed. The humiliation should have silenced him. Instead, it stoked his fire. He started calling at 3 a.m., leaving voicemails full of sobs, then screams, then eerie calm. One message was just him laughing for 2 solid minutes. Another time, he crooned a lullaby my mother used to sing, twisting it into something sour. I saved them all. Every word, every slip, every threat, evidence piling like bricks in the case I knew would come. Colin, 28, male, warned me, "He's not done. Guys like him never quit until someone makes them." He was right. Robert turned to vandalism when intimidation failed. My bike chain was cut. My dorm window shattered one morning, glass glittering across the floor like jagged snow. The final straw came when I found my textbooks dumped in the campus fountain, pages swollen and ruined. No fingerprints, but everyone knew who was behind it. Here's the twist. Instead of breaking me, he broke himself. Each act of desperation became another nail in his coffin. The board petitioned for his removal. Regulators expanded the scope of the investigation. The paper ran a follow-up article titled, "Collapse of a Tyrant," complete with stills of him screaming in the quad. And me? I stopped hiding. I started walking through campus with my head high, earbuds in, a smile on my face. Not because I didn't fear him, oh I did, but because I knew the narrative had flipped. For years I was the shadow under his empire. Now he was the Mad King, shrieking while the walls came down. One night I sat at the kitchen table alone. The house was quieter than it had ever been. The broken chair he'd thrown in part 6 still lay in pieces by the wall. I picked up a fragment of wood, turned it in my hand, and thought, revenge doesn't always look like fire. Sometimes it looks like silence, like survival, like being the one who walks away while he drowns in the ashes he lit himself. And for the first time I believed it. I wasn't just free of Robert. I was the one who had ended him. By the time the lawsuits hit, Robert was more ghost than man. His company, once his cathedral, was gutted. The board voted him out, investors cut him loose, and suppliers blacklisted him. He went from Robert, the kingmaker, to Robert, the cautionary tale, in less than 6 months. And I savored every headline. The debts piled high and fast. Creditors clawed at what was left, his house, his cars, even the lake cabin he bragged about building with his bare hands. When the sheriff's office showed up with foreclosure papers, neighbors peeked from their curtains while movers hauled out his leather couches and framed awards. I stood across the street, backpack slung over my shoulder, watching him scream at the deputies, veins bursting in his neck. "You can't do this! This is mine! Mine!" He tripped over a box of his own files, sprawling face first into the dirt. For once, no one rushed to help him up. The lawsuits went public next. Former employees testified about toxic workplaces, unpaid wages, intimidation. One even admitted he'd seen Robert smash a printer over a missed deadline. The courtroom sketch went viral. Robert red-faced, fists clenched, looking like a caricature of rage. Comment sections turned him into a meme. Obey or inherit debt. Through it all, he tried to drag me down with him. He accused me of conspiring with his enemies, of leaking documents, of brainwashing Colin. He even subpoenaed me, forcing me to sit in a courtroom while his lawyers grilled me. But they underestimated something. I wasn't afraid anymore. I answered each question calmly, truthfully, sometimes even with that same smile that haunted him. Every time I smiled, his face twisted, and the jury noticed. Colin stayed by my side through all of it. After one long day in court, he leaned over and whispered, "You realize this is the revenge, right? Not the documents, not the articles, it's this. Him watching you stand taller while he crumbles." He was right. The inheritance Robert dangled over my head my entire life was nothing but an illusion. The real inheritance was freedom, the knowledge that his power was never as big as he wanted me to believe. The night the verdict came down, massive fines, no chance of appeal, I walked past the courthouse steps where Robert sat alone, his suit wrinkled, hair disheveled. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashing, but no one offered him a hand. His empire was dust. His name was poison. His debts were the only thing left for him to pass on. I didn't stop. I didn't gloat. I just walked by, head high, and for the first time in my life, I felt untouchable. The final collapse wasn't a bang. It was silence. Weeks after the verdict, Robert's house sat hollow on the hill, blinds drawn, lawn overgrown. No cars in the driveway, no laughter of investors spilling from cocktail parties, no glow from the chandelier that once lit his kingdom. It looked less like a home and more like a mausoleum. His mausoleum. One evening, I drove past and saw him sitting on the front steps. No suit, no cigar, just sweatpants, a stained t-shirt, and eyes that looked like ash. He didn't see me at first. He was hunched over, clutching a stack of overdue bills, tearing them into strips and letting the pieces scatter across the dirt like confetti. For a funeral no one attended. For the first time in my life, Robert looked small. He spotted me then. Our eyes locked across the yard. For a moment, I expected the old Robert, the sneer, the threat, the booming voice. Instead, he just whispered hoarse, "There's nothing left." His voice cracked, not from rage this time, but from emptiness. I thought about walking up, thought about telling him he was right, but then I remembered every slammed door, every bruise hidden beneath long sleeves, every voicemail where he laughed or cried or threatened. I remembered the slashed tires, the broken chair, the wedding photo he destroyed twice. I remembered the years of being told obedience was the price of love, so I smiled one last time. Not the taunting smile, not the smile that haunted him. This one was different. It was a goodbye. And then I drove away. Months later, the business was dissolved. The debts were auctioned, the assets stripped. His name became a footnote in articles about corporate collapse. Students on campus still joked about the viral video of him screaming in the quad, but to me, he was just gone. A hollow man trapped in the ruins he built with his own hands. I built my own life quietly. Picked up extra shifts, finished school, kept working with Colin on projects that had nothing to do with Robert. For the first time, every step I took felt like mine. Not borrowed, not conditional, not dangled over my head. And here's the sweet revenge. He was right all along. I inherited nothing, not a cent, Not a house, not a car, nothing. But that's exactly what saved me. His debts died with him. His empire turned to rubble, and I walked away clean. No chains, no shadow, no blood money binding me. Nothing, it turned out, was everything.